Привет, меня зовут Adam Lansky, и я американский аудиоинженер для группы Simple is Good из Borovska, Rodina. Я пришел с миром. Hi, my name is Adam Lansky. I'm an American audio engineer for the music group Simple is Good from Khabarovsk, Russia, and I come in peace. Today we're going to be going over a full demonstration of the Focusrite Saffire Pro 40's I/O capabilities using outboard preamps and compressors. Some people have been asking for a video with the Saffire Pro 40, how do I use outboard gear, including preamps, compressors, and other stuff. How do I set gain staging? Well, today we're going to be going over an awesome example with some drums for a favorite group of mine called Simple is Good. If you want to hear more of their music from before, you can check out Simple is Good. Go to Last.fm, search artists, and type in Simple is Good, and you'll find some of their music. It's awesome post-rock, drums, synths, guitars, very spacey, very emotional, and I have the pleasure of working with these guys on some of the tracks for their new record. I'm not sure when it's coming out, but today we are going to be taking the opportunity to learn about the Saffire Pro 40. We are going to be connecting it to some equipment that you may have, including the PRO VLA II Vactrol compressor, a Chameleon Labs 7720. We've got some TubeMP outboard preamps. We've got a Millennia HV-3D, a BBE 382i sonic maximizer. We are going to be connecting this gear by sending signal out of the Pro 40 into the compressors, into the preamps, and back into the Saffire Pro 40. If you're wondering how to make all this gear happen and how to reprocess some music that you've already recorded, this is the video for you. Alright guys, let me show you the equipment that we're working with today. We've got our MacBook running Logic Pro, got some Yamaha speakers, okay, and here is the outboard gear that we are looking at. So first we've got some of our TubeMPs up here. You've probably seen before. Here we've got our PRO VLA and Chameleon Labs 7720 stereo compressor. So this PRO VLA can do two channels separately, or you can stereo link them to run it as a stereo compressor, but we'll be just running them dual mono. This Chameleon Labs is only a stereo compressor, but we can run channel 1 mono using just the left channel input. We've got our Millennia HV-3D preamp right here. We've got our Focusrite Saffire Pro 40, and we've got some custom painted 382i sonic maximizers. The first thing we are going to do is reamp the snare top and bottom through the PRO VLA compressor, and we're going to reamp the overhead left and right microphones in through the Chameleon Labs 7720. So if you'll follow along starting from the Saffire Pro 40, go out of channel 3 and 4 and follow that along the left side of this image into 1 and 2 input on the PRO VLA. So we're going to run the top of the snare in through channel 1 and then run the output of the PRO VLA into Millennia input 1. From Millennia input 1, we're going to run that out to our 382i sonic maximizer and back into input 3 of the Saffire Pro 40. Now you can follow the cables I've drawn in similar fashion for the rest of these channels. Channel 4 output is going to be the snare bottom into PRO VLA II to Millennia 2, back into Pro 40 input 4. Pro 40 output 5 is overhead left into the 7720 input 1, out of 7720 output 1 into Millennia channel 3 input, Millennia channel 3 output to Saffire Pro 40 input 5. Saffire Pro 40 output 6 is going to be overhead right, and you follow that cable up into input 2 of the 7720, which is going to go out to Millennia 4. Millennia 4 is coming back into Saffire Pro 40 input 6. If you want to take a minute and pause this video, follow the cables in this diagram. You can repeat this exercise at home with any other equipment you have, and I'll explain gain staging along the way. So you may be thinking to yourself, Lansky, I've already run these microphones through other preamps or into my interface. Why am I going to run them out of the interface and into another preamp and then back into the interface again? I mean, I understand why we're going to compress them, but why the preamps? And I'll tell you why. It's because I want that sonic character, that Millennia flavor, or perhaps I want to add a little bit of the tube warmth to another drum, or perhaps you have some other kind of device that you'd like to process your things through. I'm just doing my best to demonstrate since some of you asked anyways. Enough about all that. The first thing that we need to deal with is routing. Now there's two parts to routing in this equation here. Part number one is going to be internal software routing using the mix control for the Saffire Pro 40. Part 2 of routing is going to be actual hardware routing using physical cables to connect the outputs of devices to the inputs of other devices. So let's get started working on the mix control routing for our Pro 40. Now that I have Saffire Mix Control open, I need to draw your attention to our physical hardware outputs, which are down in this section right here. So what I want to do is I want to be able to go out of logic output 3 to my physical hardware output 3 on the Saffire Pro 40. Likewise, I want logic output 4 to line out 4, 5 to 5, and 6 to 6. So all that I do is change this from whatever it's set at, currently it's off, to DAW 3. So now DAW 3 output software is set to show up signal at physical hardware output 3 of the Saffire Pro 40. And I'm going to go along and repeat this process for 4, 5, and 6. So again, just to review what I've done right here, within the Saffire Mix Control software, I have routed Logic's output 3 to physical hardware output 3, Logic 4 to 4, and so on. And what this will let me do is take any line that I want within Logic and send this to any physical hardware jack on the Saffire Pro 40. Now something to note, you can see we've got a little headphone icon here and a little headphone icon over here as well. And what this means is these outputs right here are normaled to the headphone jacks that are on the front of the Saffire Pro 40. So you can send whatever you want out physical hardware output 7 and 8 out the rear panel of the Pro 40, but note that those are respectively going into the left and right ear of the headphone on the left headphone jack. Likewise, 9 and 10 are the right headphone jack on the front of your Saffire Pro 40. And this is quite important. If you zoom in on the bottom right corner of the Saffire Pro 40 mix control, you're going to see this hardware control section. So what we want to do that's really important is we want to make sure that what we have selected as hardware control, as far as our outputs are concerned, are gray. 1 and 2 are my main outputs, so those are my speakers that I'm listening to, but 3, 4, 5, 6 definitely need to be gray. So how this is done is by shift clicking on them. You'll notice if you click it blue, that means that it's correlating to the hardware control, and you shift click it to turn it gray. So what this does is it automatically sets it to line level output. So if you're clipping, or if you're peaking at 0 within your digital audio workstation, that means full line level volume coming out of your output. If it is blue, however, what that means is as you turn the knob on the front of your Saffire Pro 40, you are adjusting the volume output of those physical hardware outputs. So we want to shift click on that to make that gray. So now that our routing is done here with 3, 4, 5, and 6, we can start to do the exact same thing within our Logic program. So let me pull up the Logic window here, and we can start working within our mixer. So right now our instruments are set to outputs 1 and 2, and that's because our main outputs 1 and 2 are always going to our speakers. Also is I want to take our overheads, and I have those hard panned left and right respectively, and those are sent out to a bus. And the reason for this is because I want to process them as a stereo channel. I don't want to process each of these mono channels independently when in truth they're a stereo pair, as you'll see by my hard panning here. So I've got them going out bus 64 and into bus 64 on this auxiliary channel strip, and from there I've applied some EQ to it, and now it's set to output 1 and 2. This is going to change briefly. If I refer back to our diagrams, I've got the snare top coming output 3. So here's what I need to do. This is a two-step process right here. So I've got my snare top channel right here, and what I need to do is I need to change the output to 3 and 4. So this alone is not enough because the pan is sending equally to both output 3 and output 4. I need to pull this all the way left so that it's coming out only output 3. So I'm going to do the same thing. Here's our snare bottom track. I'm going to send this one through output 3 and 4 because that's DAW 3 and 4, and I need to turn this pan all the way up. 3 is on the left, 4 is on the right, and this is how it works for everything. Something important that needs to be noted is any of these tracks that you are outputting via the Saffire Pro 40 and have hard panned all the way, because of 3 dB pan law, they need to be pulled down to -3. If you don't, you're going to actually end up clipping on your output. So it's important that you take any of these tracks that you've hard panned, which will be all of them in due time, and make sure that you turn them all down to -3 dB. I'm just going to go ahead and do this now. If you have any questions about pan law or why we're getting a 3 dB increase when you pan all the way left or right, do yourself a favor and look it up online. We do not have time to cover that in this project right now. So I can move along to my overheads here. We've got this one overhead channel, and since both of these are already hard panned to the left side of bus 64 and the right side of bus 64, all I need to do for this is set this to outputs 5 and 6. And so left overhead will automatically be routed to 5 only, and right overhead will be routed automatically to output 6 only. So you can see something has changed about our mix window here when I zoom out. And what we're seeing now is these two other auxiliary channel strips popped up. If you're using Pro Tools, you will have to build these tracks yourself, and that's totally cool. That takes an extra 5 to 10 seconds. In Logic it happens automatically. So you'll see out here where our I/O section would be, it already says output 3, 4, output 5, 6. Perfect. So at this point, when I press play within our program, we're going to see the snare top and bottom showing up over here, and we're going to see the overheads showing up over here on 5 and 6. So one more step needs to happen at this point before we can move on to actual physical hardware routing, and this is going to take place in the arrange window for any DAW user. So what I need to do is make some new tracks. The first thing I'm going to do is make 2 mono tracks on inputs 3 and 4. So now those pop up over here. And now I'm going to create my stereo track that's input 5 and 6 for my overheads. So to make life a little easier to differentiate what's an output track and what's an input track, on the output tracks I've removed any input from the I/O section so I can easily see, okay, input 3 right here, this is my snare top. Okay, this right here is my snare bottom, and this right here, the stereo track, is my new overheads track. So just for sake of being organized, I'm going to leave these colors as blue so that I can see the difference in between what has been tracked previously, which is all colored, and then what is going to be tracked now is just going to be blue. Okay, now comes the fun part. The first thing I'm going to wire up is the overheads into the Chameleon Labs compressor. So what I need to do is I'm going to come out 5 to the left input of my Chameleon Labs. And I'm going to go out 6 of the Saffire Pro 40, this is, to the right input of the compressor. From there, I'm going to go of the left output of my compressor to input 3 on my Millennia, right output of the compressor to input 4 of the Millennia. Next, I'm going output 3 from the Millennia to input 5 of my Saffire Pro 40, output 4 of the Millennia to input of the Pro 40. So at this point, our overhead reamp is physically wired here. Now it's time to do the snare drums. So I've got my top and bottom snare. Top snare is coming out of 3 into channel 1 of my Pro VLA. The bottom of the snare is output 4 of the Saffire Pro 40 to input 2 of the Pro VLA. Using some short XLR cables, I'm going to take output channel 1 of my compressor to input 1 of the Millennia, output channel 2 of my compressor to input channel 2 of the Millennia. So here's where something slightly different happens. I only want to process the top of the snare using the sonic maximizer. So I've got output 1, and I'm going to run that into channel A input on my maximizer down here. And then from there, I'm going channel A output on the maximizer into Pro 40 input 3. Now for the bottom of the snare, I don't want to process with that, so I'm just going to come straight out of channel 2 into channel 4 of my Saffire Pro 40. So at this point, our reamp wiring is complete, and it's time to retrack snare and overheads. I am going to mute the tracks that we are not reamping right now, being our toms, our hi-hat, and our kick, and I'll just press play so that I can listen to what's going on. So I press play, and I'm not seeing anything coming in on my input tracks here. I don't hear anything. If I come over to my equipment I can see that I've got lights going off, I've got signal coming in. Okay, why don't I hear anything? And that's because probably you need to record arm, or at least input your tracks. So you'll hear as soon as I click record arm, there we go. We've got our volume again. Now it's time to get our hardware set how we would like it. Compression is a process that is done almost entirely to taste. There is a range of compression that sounds good or musical within any given context, and there's a range that is over compression and lacking in automatic level control. So this is how I work. I suggest you experiment, try different things. Today I'm just showing you what I do with my stuff. So, okay, it's time to run the snare top out and into our hardware devices. So I'm going to find a good solid snare hit and press play. And so, since I have our snare top track record armed in my digital audio workstation, we are hearing it. And I can control the volume with the Pro 40's master monitor output right here. And so anytime you're compressing, you want to focus on what you're working with. So let's just look at channel 1 right here, because we are just compressing the snare top. So I'm going to set my attack at a number that I like. Experiment for yourself. And I'm going to set my ratio at about 3:1. And when I start dropping my threshold, we want to watch for gain reduction on the digital meter right here. And we'll see, okay, we're getting a little bit of blanking now. So what's really cool about a digital LED segment meter like this is if it lights up, that means that that's what you're hitting, even if it's just a brief little teeny blink. So that's 6 dB of compression right there. So there's no 5, so I'm going to just sort of try and maneuver this knob because it's got detents, so it's just barely kissing the 6. So let's go with that. So next, we've got our output gain control. So for those of you that are new to the Pro VLA, you've got, you can monitor the output through the VU, and you can also monitor the output over here on the digital output level. I'm going to watch the digital output over here, and I'm going to want to hit at about 9. You can go up to plus 12, but that's when you start getting a really toasty tube sound on that snare, and I don't want too much. But where it's at right now, 0 to 3, that's a little too clean. I want some of that heat. So I'm going to start turning this up. And that's good right there. So I can listen, I can bypass. And you can hear, I hope you can hear, there's a little bit more of the beef of that snare comes up when I'm compressing that transient. So in regards to gain staging, someone asked a question, how do you gain stage when you've got multiple outboard devices like this set up? And the answer is you gain stage every single step of the way. So next we would have our Millennia, which is down here, and I'm coming into channel 1. And we can see that we're getting signal right here. I am going to turn this up just a little bit and listen carefully, because the 382i it could possibly clip if I turn this up too hot. So I'm looking at my meter in Logic, and I'm hitting a solid 1.8 coming in. Now I'd like to add just a little bit of that maximizer to add some crispness. So that's good. So I'm happy with that at this point. Now it's time to move on to the snare bottom, and I'm going to repeat this process. I'll record arm input 4 on my DAW, and I'll press play over the same loop. And now we're going to move on to compressor 2. And I really like that rattle, because this is on the bottom of the snare. So I want to reach down, and this one I don't want to compress as much. I want to leave the ratio down at 2:1, so it's going to reach down a little further before it starts compressing. So I'll turn this knob up here, and I'm only going to go for about 2 to 4 dB. And let's listen. So I'll leave it right there. And I'll repeat the same process over here. With my output level, I'm watching my meter. I want to come up to 9. Okay, cool. So at this point, there is no sonic maximizer in the way. So all I want to do is I want to look at my meter within my DAW, and I'm going to turn up my Millennia here on channel 2 while I'm watching the meter. Okay, so we're looking at the snare bottom right here, and you can see right now we're at minus 4.4, so I'm going to just eat up a little bit more of that headroom by turning up my preamp here. And 0.8 is pretty close. There might be something slightly louder. I'm going to back it up to 2 again. And let's roll with this. Now I'm getting ready to compress my overhead tracks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look through and try and find a spot that's got a good amount of heat to it. Like something that looks pretty nice. This is a good section right here that we're looking at. And let's see what else. This is possibly pretty good. This, I think, is one of the loudest spots, and I've kind of marked it ahead of time. And you can see that we've got some transients that appear to be the snare that are going pretty hot. So this looks like a good spot to begin our compression. Can you see how right here we've got this really nice big snare hit? This is going to be a perfect spot for us to set our compression. So I'm going to build a loop around this area right here and just sort of let that hang. Let's build a nice big loop. I need to make sure that I have my input track here record armed, which I already do. We're going to start listening to these overheads and apply compression. Let's press play and start working with this 7720 here. Just from looking at the meters within Logic, I can see that this is a perfect spot because one of my overheads is peaking at minus 0.1 dB. Let's start doing some work here. We've got our compressors currently engaged. This meter is metering compression, so that's gain reduction. So if I click this to left in, we can start seeing some action on that VU. But I know it's already a good level, so I'm going to just set to gain reduction. This high pass filter knob is pretty interesting. This is not actually a genuine EQ on there. What that's doing is changing the frequencies that the compressor is reacting to. So this way, what you can do is turn it up, and it will not allow anything below 60 hertz, 90 hertz, etc. to trigger the compressor. Now I've already EQ'd out everything below 50, so I'm going to just leave this where it is. And that EQ setting is not necessarily something you want to have on every single given drum kit. It's just where I've done it for this particular set. Attack wise, I'm going to go ahead and set that to 10 milliseconds. Release, I'm going to leave down at 100 because I want it to act pretty quick. Now ratio, I'm going to just go to 2 because I don't think 1.5 is enough and 4 is too heavy for overheads. I don't want to slam them. Again, this is just my opinion. Now I'm going to start lowering the threshold and we can watch the gain reduction happening, and let's listen. So I can hear it working. It's a fairly transparent compressor. Here's without it. And here's with it. And the difference that I'm hearing is I'm hearing everything being brought down more into a similar level as each other. If I change this attack to 3 milliseconds, I'll hear the compressor working even harder on some of those transients. But I'm going to just leave it right where it is, because I can always add more, just a little bit more gentle compression in the DAW, but once I compress the tape, it's done. So now that I have that set, I have two choices. I can use the makeup gain on the compressor over here, or I can use my Millennia as my makeup gain. And the reason I might do this is because this compressor, this is about a $500 compressor, $540, somewhere in that range. This Millennia, each channel costs $500, so I'm inclined to say that these preamps are probably slightly higher quality than just this single guy out here. But what you'll notice is that the Millennia, by default, is already adding 8 dB of gain just by having it in the signal chain. Okay, so I tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to meet somewhere in the middle. So we're watching our overhead track right here. We're peaking at -7.5. I'll go ahead and give a click on each channel of the Millennia. And that takes us up to 6.5. And let's do one more on each channel. 5.1. So at this point, for the sake of variety, I'll start turning up the output gain of the 7720 compressor and eat up just a little bit more of that headroom right there. That works. At this point, all of our levels are set for our snare and our overheads. So what I'm going to do is record them back into the computer. So we make sure that we turn off our loop, and let's go ahead and get this ready to record. So we've got our 3 tracks over here that are record armed, and they are ready to go. Everything that is not being recorded is muted, so all I do at this point is I press record. And here's what happens. So as per our routing, what we'll see is the channels going out, output 3.4, and over here, out 5.6, are coming out through here in the software, and then are coming back in on these tracks right here to be recorded. I'm gonna just let this run all the way through, and then we'll come back and record the kick and the hi-hat and the toms. Now that recording is done, I'm going to take our tracks out of record arm, and I'm also going to mute them because we don't want to hear them now. I'm going to go to our overheads that were our original tracks, and I'll just reset those to no output for now. And I'll come to my toms and my hi-hat. I'm going to unmute them and unmute the kick. Let's mute the snares and also set those to no output because we don't want that signal coming out while we're going to be tracking these new instruments. For the toms, hi-hat, and kick drum, it may look a little more complicated, but all we've done is added another device, being our TubeMP for our kick drum. Just as before, you can follow output 3 and 4 for both of our toms into the PRO VLA input, which is not going to be stereo ganged. We're going to run those as independent channels into the Millennia, and then out of the Millennia back into inputs 3 and 4 of our Pro 40. Outputs 5 and 6 of the Pro 40 are slightly different. Output 5 is our hi-hat, and I don't want to compress that. I just want to run that straight into my Millennia and back into the Saffire Pro 40. Output 6 you'll see is the kick drum. That I'm running mono into the 7720 compressor, and from there I'm going into the TubeMP to add a little bit of tube warmth. From there, I'm going to run that into our sonic maximizer and then back into input channel 6 of the Saffire Pro 40. So I have the kick and hi-hat are set to outputs 5 and 6. So let's get them on 5 and 6. Hard pan our kick, hard pan. And let's come right on over to our toms. And those are already hard panned, but we need to have those set to outputs 3 and 4. So this way, tom 1 is only 3 out, tom 2 is only 4 out. The kick is only going out of output 5, and our hi-hat is only going out of output 6. And you'll notice that we've still got our outputs 3 and 4 waiting for us right over here. At this point, it's time to get our wiring set and our connections made. First, let's connect our toms. Tom 1 and 2 are coming out of out 3 and 4 respectively, and into inputs 1 and 2 of our Pro VLA, respectively. I can sort of twist this wire here so this folds over neatly. There we go. Now let's go into the Millennia for some of that beautiful makeup gain. I'm going to take channel 2 of our VLA to Millennia channel 2. Channel 1 into channel 1. Easy enough. Now it's time to go back into the interface. We've got Millennia out 1 into interface input 3. Millennia out 2 into interface input 4. Let's connect our kick. So the kick drum is coming out of output 5, and we're sending this into the left channel of our 7720. We don't go into the right channel because the left channel is designed for mono. From left output of this 7720, we're going into the input of our TubeMP, which is this little guy right here. So I'll click that right into input. You want to make sure you go into input, not output. It's a very easy way to cause much confusion. From the output of the TubeMP into our Sonic Maximizer channel A input, Sonic Maximizer channel A output, into analog input 5 on our Pro 40. Now with the hi-hat, I do not want to compress it, so I'm going to just go straight out of output 6 of our interface into input 3 of the Millennia. And output 3 of the Millennia is going into input of our Saffire Pro 40 analog in. So now we are wired up and ready to retrack through our analog outboard gear. So before we can begin getting level back into our Logic program, I'm going to need to create some new tracks for us to record to. So I need 4 mono tracks, and I want them input 3 ascending. So what that's going to mean down here now is we've got inputs 3, 4, 5, 6 on our new tracks, and those are all output 1 and 2, which is cool. So the first one is Tom 1, got Tom 2, got our kick, and our hi-hat. So now those are ready to record. So let's start sending some level to our devices and set level there. I've got a loud tom hit circled up here, but let's try a different approach this time. I'm going to press play and we're peaking at -4.4. So what I'm going to do first is turn up my Millennia so that on the makeup gain already we're going to hit close to 0. And I'm okay with that 2.0 right there. So let's come back to our compressor and let's focus on channel 1. Toms, you tend to want to hit a little harder than some other things. So I'm going to start at a ratio of about 5 to 1. Let's back up our attack a little bit. And again, I'll leave my release down at 150 milliseconds because that's as fast as this compressor goes. And let's start bringing it down. Let's roll with that. Okay, so we're hitting +9 on the VLA, and in Logic we're hitting 2. So I'm okay with this level, and this sounds pretty good to me. So let's move on to Tom 2. So we'll repeat this process. We're gonna record arm Tom 2. And let's find a nice loud tom hit. It looks like we have one up here. So cool. Let's put a loop around that. And let's come back to our compressor over here. So I'll repeat the process in the same fashion. We're hitting at -4.1 in Logic. So let me turn this up a couple of clicks. -1.7, fine. Let's roll with that. Okay, so time to squish tom number 2. And I'll do the same thing. The reason you turn the attack up a little bit to a level that you like, to a time that you like, that is to allow an amount of the transient by the compressor. If you completely pancake everything by just turning the attack as low as possible, you actually start losing some of the natural characteristic of the drum, which is to have a degree of transience to it in the beginning. So typically I'll put my drums somewhere 10 to 15 milliseconds. So I'll just park that there. Let's turn up our ratio again up to about 5 to 1. And let's start dropping our threshold. And let's listen. Cool, that's sounding good to me. Nice. Big difference without it. You can really hear that deep ring now when you've compressed it properly. So let's take a look at our input gain now. And we are clipping on the input. I'm going to back down the Millennia here, and let's try again. Great, I'll take it. Let's move on to the kick and the hi-hat. So now it's time to find a nice hard kick hit. So let's zoom in a little bit and sort of check out the audio waves. We can scan through, right? And I'll zoom in on this a little more. And as we get towards the end of our track, we can see that here's an excellent spot where the drummer has pounded on that kick drum, probably about as hard as she's going to. So let's go ahead and loop that area up right there. And just zoom in and make sure that we're liking it. Okay, we can see our super hard kick hit is right there. And I'll even tighten up this loop some. So we can see the area we've got looped right now, and we can see that here is our heaviest kick part. So let's run this through the 7720 and the maximizer. So before messing with the compressor, I suggest setting level on the TubeMP, because right now our dials on our gain and our output are all the way down. Until we pass some level through this device, we're not going to get anything back to our DAW over here. So I'll press play, and we can see that, okay, we're sending kick level. Let's look over here. Something to know about the TubeMP is how the gains work on this device. The input is your tube, and the output is actually a solid state. What you can do is say, okay, do I want to start with more tube heat and then start turning up the output, and we can start seeing the needle move? Or do you want a more clean sound, and do you want to start with your solid state all the way up and then start delicately blending your tube into it, which we can do just as well. So I'm going to start with the output just at about 12 o'clock and then start turning up the input until we're getting a healthy level over here on our kick track. So I can hear some clipping occurring, and we can witness it right here on this light. So let's turn down the tube input and instead turn up the output. We're properly set over here. So now we can move on to the 7720 compressor, and let's make sure that we're getting a healthy level. So what I'll do is I'll switch my meter to left in, and we can see that needle jumping. And that looks pretty good to me. Let's move right on over, and let's set the attack to 10. We want to leave our release down at 0.1 seconds. Ratio, let's go 4:1. Let's go ahead, switch to monitoring the compression and start reducing our threshold. And turn up our listening volume. So that's starting to sound quite nice right there. And I'll begin turning up this output gain. That compressor is kicking this kick drum really nicely. It's already a pretty well recorded kick drum, but when I punch it in, you can hear the slamming of it much harder. Now let's watch the input gain, and I'll turn up our kick drum here. On our Saffire Pro 40, I'm turning up input 5. And that's a very powerful sounding kick drum. Let's add a little bit of sonic maximizer to it. Re-recording the hi-hat is going to be very simple because it's not even running through a compressor. In fact, it is just coming into input 3 on our Millennia here, and then it's going to input 6 on the interface. I'll come into the computer and record arm that, and find a section that has some hi-hat smashing around. One 1.2 is pretty close. I'll come over to my Millennia knob here and I'll drop that down by one more click, and let's retrack. I'll turn off the loop that I've got going on up here and back up to 0. I'm going to record arm these tracks by highlighting them and clicking R, and then so just like last time, I'll allow this track to fully record, and then we'll come back and check out the results. Now all of our original recordings have been retracked through our Outboard analog gear, and we can see here's all of the new ones, and here are all of the old ones. So let's give a listen to a couple of things and see what we think. In my opinion, the 382i Sonic Maximizer is probably not the best version of their maximizer for this application. They do make another version that has XLR inputs on it and individual controls per channel, and I understand that that's much more suited for putting in a signal chain as you're tracking, whereas the 382i seems better for live use after a mixer but before a PA system. I'm very happy with these results. I think everything sounds great. I love the color that I get from the Outboard analog gear. I personally think Outboard analog always sounds better than any plugin I've ever played with. There are plugins that I use in my production and tracking, but I still think that it's really difficult to beat a quality outboard piece of equipment. I sincerely thank you for watching this video. I hope that you had a good time, and I hope that you learned something. I look forward to hearing your tracks as well, so stay in touch. Please like the channel Lansky Sound, and come back and request other reviews that you want to see, or other equipment or techniques that you're curious about, and I'd love to make a video for you about it. Also, be sure to check out Simple is Good on Last.fm. Listen to their album that they put out just towards the end of last year. We're going to keep working on this new one, and hopefully we'll have something really cool to show you guys before 2016 rolls around. Have a great day, and happy recording, guys.